In the heart of Montana's wilderness, an extraordinary tale unfolds that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the bonds of love and family. Tonight we bring you the incredible story of Snow, a rare white lion cub, and his desperate quest to save the only mother he's ever known, a wounded leopard named Luna. This remarkable journey will take you through the untamed landscapes of America's last frontier, where nature's rules are about to be rewritten by the power of unconditional love. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more amazing stories like this to life. The first snowflakes of winter danced through the crisp Montana air as dawn broke over the Bitterroot Mountains. Inside the world-renowned Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood frozen, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. Through the observation window, she witnessed something unprecedented, a sight that would forever change her understanding of wildlife rehabilitation. In the specialized enclosure before her, Luna, a rescued African leopard, lay curled protectively around a tiny white bundle of fur. The bundle stirred, revealing the impossible: a white lion cub, no more than 2 weeks old. The sanctuary had received Luna just days ago, severely injured from a trafficking attempt that had ended in a dramatic rescue on the outskirts of Missoula. This shouldn't be possible, Sarah whispered to herself, her breath fogging the glass. The leopard, despite her injuries, had somehow formed an immediate bond with the orphaned cub that had arrived the same night. Both victims of the same trafficking ring, yet from entirely different species. As Sarah watched, Luna's golden eyes met hers through the glass. The leopard's gaze held no hostility, only a fierce protectiveness that transcended the natural order. The white cub, which the staff had named Snow, nuzzled closer to Luna's warm fur, completely unaware that such a relationship defied everything known about big cat behavior. The peaceful scene was shattered by the sudden blare of emergency alarms. Red lights flashed throughout the facility as Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Dr. Mitchell, Luna's showing signs of internal bleeding. The injuries from the trafficking incident, they're worse than we thought." Sarah's heart raced as she sprinted toward the medical bay. Behind her, Snow's confused mewls echoed through the corridor, a sound that would haunt her dreams for months to come. As the medical team rushed to stabilize Luna, none of them could have predicted the extraordinary chain of events their unique bond would set in motion. The sanctuary's head veterinarian, Dr. James Cooper, burst through the doors, his face grave. "Sarah, we need to separate them. Luna's condition is critical and we can't risk—" "No," Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. "You didn't see what I just saw. Separating them now could be devastating for both of them." She paused, watching as Snow paced anxiously at Luna's side, his tiny white paw reaching out to touch her spotted fur whenever the leopard winced in pain. As night fell over the sanctuary, the staff worked tirelessly to stabilize Luna's condition. Through it all, Snow refused to leave her side, his presence seeming to have an almost magical effect on the injured leopard's vital signs. Dr. Cooper stood at the observation window, shaking his head in disbelief as he reviewed Luna's charts. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered. "Her blood pressure stabilizes every time the cub comes close. It's as if they're meant to be together," Sarah finished, her eyes fixed on the unlikely pair. But even as she spoke those words, a shadow passed over her face. Luna's latest blood work had revealed complications that none of them had anticipated. The sanctuary's resources were limited, and the specialized treatment she needed was only available at a facility across the country. As Snow curled up against Luna's warming blanket, his small form rising and falling with each breath, Sarah made a decision that would change all their lives forever. She didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of an adventure that would test the bounds of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable spirit of two souls brought together by fate. Through the observation window, Snow's ice-blue eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment, she saw something that transcended scientific explanation, a determination and wisdom far beyond his few weeks of life. Together, they would face challenges that seemed insurmountable. But for now, in the quiet of the Montana night, a miracle was already unfolding. The falling snow outside cast ethereal shadows through the medical bay windows, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf's howl echoed through the mountains. It was as if nature itself was bearing witness to this extraordinary bond, one that would soon capture the hearts of millions and prove that love knows no boundaries, not even those set by nature itself. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dr. Sarah Mitchell's office as she stared at the specialist's report on her computer screen. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the devastating news. Luna's internal injuries were far more severe than initially suspected. The advanced treatment she needed was only available at the National Wildlife Medical Center in Virginia, clear across the country. "We can't separate them," Tom Henderson, the sanctuary's senior keeper, argued passionately. His weathered face showed the strain of sleepless nights spent monitoring the unusual pair. "That cub hasn't eaten properly since Luna's condition worsened. It's like they share the same heartbeat." Sarah ran her fingers through her graying hair, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "The transport alone could kill Luna in her condition. But if we don't try..." Her voice trailed off as she watched Snow through the security feed, his small white form pressed against Luna's enclosure, refusing to leave even for meals. The sanctuary's radio crackled to life. "Dr. Mitchell, you need to see this immediately." The urgency in the voice sent Sarah running toward the medical bay, her heart pounding with each step. As she burst through the doors, she stopped dead in her tracks. Snow had somehow managed to squeeze through a tiny gap in the barrier, and now lay curled against Luna's neck. But it was what happened next that left everyone in the room speechless. Luna, who had been refusing food for days, slowly lifted her head as Snow nudged a piece of meat toward her mouth with his tiny paw. "Come on, girl," Snow seemed to plead, his blue eyes fixed intently on his adoptive mother's face. To everyone's amazement, Luna took small bites. Encouraged by the cub's persistent nudging, Dr. Cooper quickly began documenting the unprecedented behavior, his scientific skepticism warring with the miracle unfolding before him. "This changes everything," Sarah whispered, her mind racing. "If we separate them now..." The decision was made more complicated by a call from Agent Marcus Reynolds of the Wildlife Trafficking Task Force. The trafficking ring that had brought Luna and Snow to Montana was still active, and there were credible threats against the sanctuary. Some of the traffickers remained at large, and intelligence suggested they were determined to reclaim their valuable cargo, particularly the rare white lion cub. As if sensing the tension in the room, Snow pressed closer to Luna, his tiny body offering what protection it could. Luna's golden eyes remained alert despite her pain, her maternal instincts clearly extending beyond the boundaries of species. That night, as a storm raged outside the sanctuary walls, Sarah made the most difficult decision of her career. "We'll transport them together," she announced to her stunned staff. "It goes against every protocol we have, but I won't be the one to break this bond." The logistics were nightmarish. They would need a specialized transport vehicle, medical equipment for Luna's ongoing care, and security to protect them from the trafficking ring. The journey would take them through some of the most challenging terrain in America, from the rugged mountains of Montana to the rolling hills of Virginia. As the team began their preparations, Sarah received an unexpected visit from Harold Blackwood, a local rancher who had been following Luna and Snow's story through his daughter, one of the sanctuary's volunteers. "I couldn't help but overhear about your transport problems," he said, removing his worn cowboy hat. "I've got a custom livestock trailer, state-of-the-art medical monitoring equipment installed after my wife's prize horses. Well, that's another story. It's yours if you need it." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched Snow attempting to groom Luna's fur, just as he would have done with his biological mother. The leopard responded with a gentle purr, despite her obvious pain. "Sometimes," Harold continued, his voice thick with emotion, "love makes its own rules. My Emily used to say that God has a special place in his heart for those who care for his creatures. What you're doing here, it's something special." As the sanctuary staff worked through the night to prepare for the journey, no one noticed the dark figure watching from the tree line, speaking quietly into a phone. "They're moving them. Yes, both of them. Tomorrow night." The figure melted back into the shadows as security lights swept across the perimeter, leaving only footprints in the fresh Montana snow. Inside, Snow had fallen asleep against Luna's side, his white fur almost glowing in the dim light of the medical bay. Luna's protective gaze never wavered from the doorway, her instincts telling her that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The bond between them, miraculous as it was, would soon be tested in ways that none of them could have imagined. The custom transport vehicle crawled through the darkness of the Montana wilderness, its precious cargo secured within. Dr. Sarah Mitchell sat in the medical compartment, her eyes fixed on the monitors displaying Luna's vital signs. Beside the injured leopard, Snow remained vigilant, his white fur illuminated by the soft glow of medical equipment. "How are they holding up?" Tom's voice crackled through the radio from the lead vehicle. "Stable," Sarah responded, but her voice carried an edge of concern. They were only 6 hours into their cross-country journey, and already the strain was showing on Luna's face. Snow seemed to sense it too, periodically nuzzling his adoptive mother's face and letting out soft, encouraging mewls. The convoy had left the sanctuary under the cover of darkness, with Harold Blackwood himself at the wheel of the transport vehicle. His experience moving precious cargo through difficult terrain had proven invaluable, especially as they navigated the treacherous mountain roads. "You remind me of my Emily," Harold spoke softly to Luna through the internal partition. "She never gave up either, fought right until the end." His voice caught as he remembered his late wife, and in the medical compartment, Luna's ears twitched at the emotion in his words. The first sign of trouble came just past the Wyoming border. Sarah noticed a black SUV that had been following them for the last hour, keeping a consistent distance. "Harold!" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think we've got company." Before Harold could respond, 2 more vehicles emerged from a side road, their high beams flooding the transport with blinding light. "Hold on!" Harold shouted, his hands steady on the wheel as he executed a defensive driving maneuver that sent their pursuers scrambling. In the back, Sarah braced herself against the wall as the vehicle swerved. Snow let out a startled cry, but instead of seeking safety, he pressed himself more firmly against Luna's side, as if trying to protect her from the chaos. "Agent Reynolds!" Sarah spoke urgently into her satellite phone. "They found us. We need immediate assistance." The response was lost in a burst of static as they entered a dead zone. Luna's vital signs began to spike, the stress of the situation threatening to overwhelm her weakened system. Snow, displaying wisdom far beyond his weeks, began to purr softly, a sound that seemed to penetrate Luna's rising panic. To Sarah's amazement, the Leopard's heart rate began to stabilize. "We've got a roadblock ahead!" Harold's voice carried the gravity of their situation. Through the front windshield, Sarah could see the shadowy outlines of vehicles blocking the highway. Behind them, their pursuers were closing in. What happened next would later be described as nothing short of miraculous. As Harold prepared for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation, a powerful roar echoed through the night, not from Luna or Snow, but from the darkness beyond the roadblock. The sound was followed by the appearance of several large shapes moving through the trees. "Well, I'll be damned," Harold whispered in awe. A small pack of mountain lions had emerged onto the road, their presence causing immediate chaos among the traffickers. The wildcats hadn't approached the transport vehicle, almost as if they sensed their injured kin within, but their appearance had created the diversion they desperately needed. Sarah watched in disbelief as the traffickers scattered, their carefully planned ambush disrupted by this unexpected intervention from nature itself. Snow stood at attention, his blue eyes fixed on the scene outside, while Luna let out a soft chuff that seemed to carry both recognition and gratitude. As they carefully maneuvered past the abandoned roadblock, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something beyond ordinary explanation. The mountain lions melted back into the forest as silently as they had appeared, leaving behind only paw prints in the soft earth, and a story that would be told and retold for years to come. "My grandmother used to say that all of God's creatures recognize their own kind," Harold said quietly, his eyes misting as he watched Snow tenderly cleaning Luna's face in the rearview mirror, not by their spots or their color, but by the size of their hearts. The night's events had taken their toll on Luna, but as Sarah checked her vital signs, she noticed something remarkable. Despite the stress and chaos, Luna's readings had actually improved, as if the presence of her adopted cub and the mysterious intervention of their wild cousins had somehow strengthened her will to survive. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, Snow finally allowed himself to drift off to sleep, his small body rising and falling with each of Luna's breaths. Sarah knew they weren't out of danger yet, far from it. The traffickers would regroup, and they still had thousands of miles to go. But something had changed during that night in Wyoming. They had witnessed firsthand that the bond between Snow and Luna was part of something larger, something that even nature itself seemed to recognize and protect. The endless plains of South Dakota stretched before them like a sea of gold in the morning light. Inside the transport vehicle, Dr. Sarah Mitchell watched as Snow performed what had become his morning ritual, gently cleaning Luna's face with his tiny pink tongue, his movements careful around her wounds. The leopard's eyes, though glazed with pain, followed her adopted cub with unmistakable devotion. Her fever's rising again, Sarah murmured to Dr. Cooper through their secure line. We need to make an emergency stop. The words had barely left her mouth when Luna let out a low moan that made Snow's ears flatten against his head in distress. Harold guided the vehicle off the main highway, following Sarah's directions to a small veterinary clinic in Rapid City, where she had once interned. As they pulled into the back entrance, Sarah's old mentor, Dr. Grace Chen, was already waiting, her face grave as she took in Luna's condition. My God, Sarah, Grace whispered as they carefully transferred Luna into the clinic's treatment room. When you said it was unprecedented, I had no idea. She trailed off, watching in amazement as Snow refused to be separated from Luna, his tiny body pressing against her neck in a gesture so tender it brought tears to the older vet's eyes. The next few hours became a desperate race against time. Luna's internal bleeding had worsened, requiring immediate surgery. When they tried to remove Snow from the operating room, his heartbreaking cries seemed to cause Luna physical distress, her vital signs plummeting until they allowed him to stay, carefully wrapped in sterile drapes near her head. I've never seen anything like this, Grace said, her hands steady as she worked to repair the damage. It's as if their life forces are intertwined. Snow watched the procedure with an almost human understanding, his blue eyes never leaving Luna's face, occasionally letting out soft, encouraging purrs that seemed to stabilize her heart rate. Outside the clinic, Tom and Harold maintained a vigilant watch, the morning's peace shattered by the distant sound of helicopters. They're searching the main roads, Agent Reynolds reported via secure channel. But we've got reports they've hired local help. We need to move as soon as possible. The surgery seemed successful, but Luna's recovery was complicated by her weakened state. As the day wore on, Snow refused food and water, sharing his adoptive mother's distress. It wasn't until Luna managed to lap at a small bowl of water that the white cub finally accepted nourishment himself. The bond goes both ways, Sarah realized, watching Snow curl up against Luna's recovering form. He's not just depending on her, he's giving her a reason to fight. As twilight approached, Grace pulled Sarah aside, her expression troubled. Sarah, there's something you need to see. She pointed to Luna's latest blood work results. The trauma from the trafficking, the surgery, the stress. Her body is starting to shut down. If we don't get her to Virginia within the next 48 hours, a crash from the treatment room interrupted them. They rushed back to find Snow standing protectively over Luna's unconscious form, his small body bristling as he faced the window. Outside, shadows moved in the gathering darkness. They found us. Harold's urgent voice crackled through their radios. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. In that moment, Luna's eyes fluttered open, meeting Snow's gaze with a clarity that had been absent for hours. The leopard gathered her remaining strength, nuzzling her adopted cub with heart-wrenching tenderness. Then, to everyone's shock, she let out a series of soft vocalizations, sounds that mother cats use to direct their cubs to safety. She's telling him to leave her, Sarah whispered, her heart breaking as she recognized the behavior. She's trying to save him. Snow's response was immediate and unmistakable. The tiny white cub planted himself more firmly against Luna's side, his message clear. They would face whatever came together. His loyalty, pure and unshakable, seemed to infuse Luna with renewed strength. She lifted her head, her golden eyes focusing with fresh determination. Grace quickly prepared a portable medical kit while Sarah and Harold readied the transport vehicle. Outside, the sound of approaching engines grew louder. As they carefully moved Luna, Snow never left her side, his small presence somehow making her burden seem lighter. My Emily would have loved this story, Harold said softly, his weathered hands steady on the wheel as they slipped out through a back access road. She always said that true love is when you're willing to give up everything to save someone else, and when they refuse to let you make that sacrifice alone. As they disappeared into the gathering night, the white cub's fur glowed softly in the darkness, a beacon of hope beside his mother's spotted coat. Luna's sacrifice had been offered, but Snow's devotion had transformed it into something else entirely, a testament to the kind of love that transcends nature's boundaries and gives strength to the weakest moments. Lightning split the Ohio sky as the transport vehicle pushed through the worst storm the region had seen in decades. Inside, Snow pressed himself against Luna's breathing tube, his white fur sparking with static electricity in the darkness. Dr. Sarah Mitchell watched the monitors with growing desperation. Luna's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. The Virginia facility is expecting us in 6 hours. Dr. Cooper's voice crackled through the radio, barely audible over the thunder. But this storm, He didn't need to finish the thought. The rain had turned the highways into rivers, and their progress had slowed to a crawl. Snow suddenly lifted his head, letting out a series of distressed mews. Luna's oxygen levels were dropping. Sarah moved quickly, adjusting the flow rate, her hands trembling as she worked. The leopard's eyes flickered open, finding her cub's face in the dim light. Their gazes locked, and Sarah witnessed something that would haunt her forever. A look of pure love and determination passing between two beings that nature had never intended to be mother and son. "Harold," Sarah called to the front, "we need to—" Her words were cut short by a violent impact that sent medical equipment flying. Through the windshield, she caught a glimpse of a black SUV that had deliberately rammed them. "Hold on!" Harold's skilled hands fought the wheel as their vehicle hydroplaned. In the medical bay, Sarah threw herself over Snow and Luna, protecting them as best she could while equipment crashed around them. The little white cub's body curled protectively around his mother's head, shielding her from the chaos even as he himself needed protection. When the vehicle finally stopped spinning, they found themselves teetering on the edge of a steep embankment. Rain hammered the roof like bullets, and through the storm, dark figures approached with flashlights. "The traffickers," Sarah breathed, reaching for her satellite phone only to find it shattered. Luna's breathing had become labored, each breath a desperate struggle. Snow stood over her, his tiny frame trembling but his stance protective, facing the approaching threat with a courage that belied his size. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness. "FBI, hands where we can see them!" Agent Reynolds's voice boomed through a megaphone. The cavalry had arrived, but Sarah knew the real battle was still being fought inside their vehicle, where Luna's life hung by a thread. As law enforcement officers engaged with the traffickers outside, Sarah worked frantically to stabilize Luna. Snow seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, pressing his small body against his mother's side, purring with all his might. The sound filled the medical bay, a desperate prayer of love and healing. "Sarah?" Harold's voice was thick with emotion as he made his way back to them. "The road ahead is washed out. The nearest facility with adequate equipment is 30 miles back." He paused, his eyes fixed on the monitors. "She won't make it that far." In that moment, Snow did something extraordinary. He began to groom Luna's face with slow, deliberate strokes, just as she had done for him when he first arrived at the sanctuary. His tiny pink tongue worked tirelessly, the gesture so full of love and devotion that even the hardened FBI agents who had gathered around the vehicle fell silent. Luna's eyes opened fully for the first time in hours, fixing on her adopted cub with a clarity that seemed to defy her failing body. She lifted her head slightly, nuzzling Snow with what strength she had left. The monitors began to show small but steady improvements in her vital signs. "It's like watching a miracle," Agent Reynolds whispered, standing in the doorway of the medical bay. "When we tracked the trafficking ring to your sanctuary, we never imagined we'd witness something like this." Sarah checked Luna's latest readings, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Her oxygen saturation is improving, her heart rate is stabilizing. She looked at Snow in wonder. He's not just comforting her, he's literally willing her to live. Through the worst of the storm, Snow maintained his vigil, his small body pressed against Luna's larger one, their hearts beating in sync. The love between them had become a tangible force, defying the laws of nature and medicine alike. As dawn approached and the storm began to clear, Luna's condition had stabilized enough for them to proceed. "Sometimes," Harold said softly as they carefully maneuvered back onto the road, "love is the strongest medicine we have." He watched through the rearview mirror as Snow finally allowed himself to rest, his white fur contrasting sharply with Luna's spotted coat, their breathing synchronized in peaceful harmony. The morning sun bathed the National Wildlife Medical Center in Virginia in a golden glow as Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood before a crowd of reporters, her eyes bright with tears of joy. Behind her, through the observation window, Luna rested peacefully in her recovery room, her vital signs strong and steady. Snow lay curled against her neck, his white fur gleaming like freshly fallen snow. 3 weeks ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying the weight of their incredible journey. "We witnessed something that challenged everything we thought we knew about the natural world. A white lion cub and an injured leopard formed a bond that not only defied explanation, but ultimately saved both their lives." In the recovery room, Luna's eyes opened slowly, focusing immediately on her adopted son. Snow responded with a gentle purr, a sound that had become synonymous with healing throughout their extraordinary journey. The medical staff had documented remarkable improvements in Luna's condition that coincided with Snow's constant presence, a phenomenon they had begun calling the miracle of interspecies healing. Dr. James Cooper stepped forward, holding up medical charts. Luna's recovery has exceeded all our expectations. The combination of advanced treatment and... He paused, a smile softening his scientific demeanor. What can only be described as the pure love of her adopted cub has resulted in one of the most remarkable recoveries we've ever witnessed. Agent Reynolds stood at the back of the room, pride evident in his stance. The trafficking ring had been completely dismantled, its leaders facing federal charges. The evidence gathered during the investigation had led to the rescue of dozens more exotic animals and the exposure of corrupt officials who had facilitated the illegal trade. But the real heroes of this story, Reynolds announced, are right there. He gestured toward the observation window where Snow had begun his daily ritual of grooming Luna's face, each movement a testament to their unconditional love. Harold Blackwood, who had refused to leave until he knew Luna was out of danger, wiped tears from his weathered cheeks. My Emily would say this was God's way of reminding us that love doesn't care about boundaries. It just knows what belongs together. The medical center had made an unprecedented decision. Snow and Luna would remain together permanently. A special enclosure was being built at the Wild Heart Sanctuary in Montana, designed to accommodate their unique family unit. The story of their bond had touched millions around the world, inspiring changes in wildlife protection laws and increased funding for animal rehabilitation programs. As the press conference concluded, Sarah stayed behind in the recovery room. She watched as Luna gently pulled Snow closer with one massive paw, her movements now strong and sure. The little white cub snuggled into his mother's embrace, their unlikely family portrait complete. You know, Sarah spoke softly to them, when we first found you together, everyone said it was impossible. A leopard couldn't be a mother to a lion cub. It defied every natural law we knew. She reached out, gently stroking Snow's head as Luna watched with trusting eyes. But you two taught us that the greatest law of nature isn't about species or biology. It's about love. Luna's response was a deep, rumbling purr that seemed to fill the room with warmth. Snow looked up at his mother, his blue eyes filled with an wisdom far beyond his months. In that moment, Sarah understood that their story would be told for generations, not just as a medical miracle or a scientific anomaly, but as proof that love, in its purest form, knows no boundaries. As the sun set over the medical center, casting long shadows through the recovery room windows, Luna and Snow lay together, their breathing synchronized in perfect harmony. Their journey had begun in tragedy, a trafficked leopard and an orphaned cub, both victims of human greed, but it had transformed into something beautiful and profound, a testament to the healing power of unconditional love. From the observation room, visitors watched in wonder as the white lion cub and his leopard mother shared gentle touches and loving gazes, their bond a living miracle that had not only saved their lives but had changed countless others. Their story had become a beacon of hope, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories aren't found in fairy tales, but in the wild and wonderful reality of life itself. As night fell over Virginia, Snow's white fur glowed softly in the moonlight, a perfect contrast to Luna's spotted coat. Together they had defied nature, survived impossible odds, and shown the world that true love transcends all boundaries. Their miracle wasn't just about survival. It was about the transformative power of a love so pure it could heal not just bodies, but souls. And in the quiet of the recovery room, mother and son slept peacefully, their incredible journey now a part of wildlife legend, their bond a testament to the endless possibilities that exist when love writes its own rules.